I'm pleased to welcome Frank Gaffney to the Economic War Room. Frank is a dear friend. He is a pioneer and a warrior in national security. He served this nation both in the administration and outside. And right now, he is fighting probably one of the greatest threats America's ever faced. And that is a combination of the deep state, the red-green axis, and the Muslim Brotherhood. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Kevin. Great to be with you.
Well, you know, we have, over the past several years, encountered together, both on your radio program and in work at the Center for Security Policy, a growing threat whereby the deep state, or whatever you want to call it, is asking us to silence, to be quiet. Can you tell us what this war on free speech is and how it's impacted you?
Yeah, I think of it as the leading edge of the effort to take down our country, because much of that is being done, of course, by obvious enemies overseas who are engaged in various kinds of destructive activities. You've documented so well here at the Economic War Room in the battle space of our economy and trade and technology and the like. But every bit as dangerous, I think, in some ways even more dangerous, is what they're doing inside our country. And you mentioned the deep state. Of course, that's a way we now describe the hostility of people in the permanent U.S. government bureaucracy to the kind of leadership that Donald Trump is trying to provide, and Republicans more generally, I think it's fair to say. We have the red-green axis, the hard left on the one hand, and the what I think of as Sharia supremacists on the other. And the leading edge of that group is the Muslim Brotherhood. They're working to take us down sort of stealthily, and if we can't warn people about what they're doing and let them know that this threat exists and is actually metastasizing, well, it just makes their job in defeating us that much easier.
So we know from the 1930s, we know that the Nazis infiltrated our government, our education system, and so forth. When you say the word Sharia...
And the communists, of course.
And the communists did it
even more so.
In the 50s and the 60s and the 70s.
Well, actually starting back in the 30s, too.
In the 30s as
Diana
well.
West's terrific book, American Betrayal. She really documents that to it fairly well.
So this isn't new that people have infiltrated our government and society, but it seems more pervasive and it seems more threatening in certain ways. But you mentioned Sharia. So why should we be upset because someone wears a burqa at the local shopping mall?
Well, let me just back up for a second to cover the other point. I had a terrific conversation with our mutual friend Diana West on our radio show, Secure Freedom Radio, this week, in which she talked about the fact that one of the great successes of these enemies within during the heyday of the communist efforts to subvert us through our government, through the media, through our culture, and so on, was they made anti-communism the enemy instead of communism the enemy. They vilified Joe McCarthy, Senator Joe McCarthy, who was calling them out, who was using his speech on the floor of the Senate, among other places, to expose and try to protect our country against them. And he became, as I say, the problem, not the communists that he was exposing. And ever since, to this very day, Kevin, and Diana is very, very powerfully concerned about this, to this very day, it is even people on the right who are talking about, well, we don't want to be McCarthyist about this. We need people who understand there are domestic, internal security threats, and they need to be countered. So as to this question, it's not, of course, the lady in the burqa in this food mart. It is the guys who are as often as not wearing Armani suits, clean-shaven in some cases, very friendly, who just happen to be Muslim Brotherhood operatives and are working at, in their own words, there's a wonderful book on the subject that we've printed. As you know, it was not written by us. It was written by one of their top Brotherhood leaders in America, a fellow by the name of Muhammad Akram, back in 1991. And what's so interesting about this is that it reveals their secret plan for, as he put it, quote, destroying Western civilization from within by their hands, meaning ours, and the hands of the believers, so that Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions, unquote.
You're talking about the exploratory memorandum.
Exactly.
And the Muslim Brotherhood is a group that
wrote it, that in fact it was a report.
Right?
It was a report back to the mothership in Egypt about how the brothers had been doing in their first roughly 25 years of basically subversion inside America, and what they were going to be doing in the future to effect, ultimately, as he said, the destruction of America from within, with the help of Americans, notably on the left, but, frankly, the acquiescence, at the very least, of Americans who are not going to look at that unpleasant reality that we have enemies here operating against us. So we need to be alert to this, Kevin. We need to be clear-eyed about not just what's happened in the past, but what is happening under our noses,
and
defeat the red as well as the green axis operating against us.
To understand that, though, it's important that we understand that this is not anti-Muslim.
I certainly don't feel that
the Muslim Brotherhood, haven't they been designated a terror group by certain other countries?
Other countries have. In fact, among them, they've designated one of its most prominent front groups here in the United States, the Council on American Islamic Relations, also known as CARE.
Which nations?
I believe the United Arab Emirates. I think that the Egyptians have done it as well. Others have designated the Muslim Brotherhood, but not all of its subgroups.
Countries that are predominantly Muslim have acknowledged that the Muslim Brotherhood is a threat, and they've designated it as a terror group. That's the point. It's not anti-Islam. It's not anti-religion. It is a terror group.
It is a terror group. It is engaged in both pre-violent acts of warfare against us, as well as, in some places, violent ones. Its Palestinian franchise is called Hamas. Hamas is a designated terrorist organization, has been since 1994. And we've been indulging in this conceit that, well, the Muslim brothers in the Palestinian areas are terrorists, but the Muslim brothers in Washington, D.C. aren't. This is absurd and more. But it's dangerous.
But it's not just something happening in Washington. And I think this is an important point everybody needs to understand. The insidious nature of this is that what you just said has caused you to be designated a hater.
A hater, a racist, a bigot, an Islamophobe.
And yet
by the Southern Poverty Law Center, among other organizations. Right. And that brings us back to what you said at the beginning. What's the point of that? The point of that is to silence me and to try to suppress the kind of information. You said path breaking. I honestly think the work that we've been doing, and some of it with your help at the Center for Security Policy, to expose this civilization jihad, and not just in terms of their master plan, but in terms of how it's operationalized in our courts, in our financial sector, in Hollywood, in our religious institutions, in our government. That's the most important work we do. And by the way, people can get access to it for free by simply going to our website, securefreedom.org. There's a whole litany of monographs and occasional papers and videos that will tell you what you need to know about what the Brotherhood is up to. But just to close this thought out, I am very much of the view that there are Muslims in America, as elsewhere around the world, who don't want to be in perpetual war against us, who don't want to force us to submit, which of course, as you know, is the literal meaning of the word Islam. The trouble is that the authorities of the faith, and a great many of its adherents, believe that something called Sharia is the path that they must follow. It is a complete way of life that requires them to engage in jihad against everybody else until they submit and until Sharia is dominant. A totalitarian system that is absolutely at odds with our Constitution, our freedoms, our economic well-being, our lives.
Well, let's talk about this one in particular, which is the free speech.
Mhm.
So, if I want to criticize Muhammad, what does Sharia say about that?
Sharia says that's a capital offense. That's called blasphemy. And any Muslim, without any sort of authority from anybody else, can execute you at will.
So Sharia is a danger to the Constitution. Sharia comes directly in conflict with the freedoms that we have as individuals. Now we see this play out. We talk about the red-green axis. So it would be obvious and simple to say Sharia is bad and I want my free speech. But we have politicians on the left who are actually siding with Sharia. Politicians that should be part, former ACLU was defending our freedoms, our right to free speech. I'll defend the Nazis in Skokie, Illinois. I'll defend them, even though I hate them and disagree with them. I'll defend them.
Their right
That's
to
gone.
speak.
Yes.
It's all over the side. And unfortunately, Kevin, it's not just politicians. We're talking about the left as a monolithic whole are now throwing in with people who, the last time I checked, have no use for some of the most important constituencies within the left. Think about it. If Muslim Brotherhood or other Sharia supremacists have their way, feminists, homosexuals, Jews, apostates, people in the arts, songwriters, all are endangered species.
That's an amazing.
They are at mortal peril, and yet they're all seeing what they can do to help these guys achieve their victory over us. It's insane. But this is what we need to be able to speak about so that the common sense, the survival instincts for that matter, of most Americans will kick in and say, wait a minute, we're not going to accommodate, in the name of religious practice, what isn't a religion. I mean, it's got a patina of religiosity to it, Sharia does, but as a practical matter, you mentioned Nazism, you mentioned communism, it's communism with a god.
Which is very scary.
Which is even more dangerous, actually, than the atheistic version, because people in this country tend to give it a pass because, it's somebody's religion, we practice freedom of religion. You can't give freedom of religion to a totalitarian political ideology that seeks your destruction, even if they say it's in the name of religious freedom.
The Constitution is not a suicide pact,
It should
as
not
the judges have ruled.
It should not
So
be.
with that, though, this isn't just impacting you. I mean, you're on television, you're on radio, and so forth, and so there's an attempt to squelch your speech. This is coming down to individuals and what they post on Facebook.
Indeed.
And so instead of just looking at is this fact or not fact, which is the whole fake news issue, now there is a censorship. Well, could this offend someone? Is this hate speech?
Let me tie these things together, because you mentioned the Southern Poverty Law Center a moment ago. This was a group that started out opposing the Ku Klux Klan, but now is a full-on political warfare instrument for the red and the green elements of the red-green axis. And social media platforms like Google, like Facebook, like Twitter, like YouTube are using the Southern Poverty Law Center as the arbiter of the speech or other content they will allow to have on their platforms.
Weren't they just sued by a Muslim for
They not only
defaming?
were sued, but they settled, in effect, with multiple apologies, and more to the point, a $3.375 million settlement, acknowledging that they get things wrong, that factually some of their representations about people who are haters and racists and bigots are wrong, and that, witness that settlement, they make material harm to those people by falsely accusing them of things they're not. This is why it is a discredited organization, and none of these organizations, not the social media platforms, not the corporations which are enriching this outfit to the tune of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, but also the journalists who reflexively will repeat whatever the Southern Poverty Law Center says in the furtherance of its attempts to suppress people like us.
But the FBI, didn't they use them for a while?
They did, and they stopped. They recognized that they were not reliable. As I say, they have been recognized to be discredited. But other people are still using them, like the Googles and the Facebooks and the Twitters, and like a whole host of journalists at the New York Times, at the Washington Post, at Politico. I was talking to a Politico guy just the other day, and it's clear that he is informed, and his audience, his readers will be informed by the idea that pay no attention to this fellow because he is a racist, hater, bigot, Islamophobe, what have you, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Well, there's a direct economic impact. We saw a triple amputee veteran who had his Facebook page removed after he put some $300,000 into advertising, and they just took away his livelihood. People now depend on Facebook and Google and other social media platforms for their livelihood. They built whole businesses on there, and if you have the SPLC, the ability to yank the chain or to pull them off, then you've just handed a terror, not the SPLC, but those that are aligned with terror groups, the opportunity to hurt you individual financially.
Yeah, this is beyond livelihood. This is about lives. The Southern Poverty Law Center was named in federal court in the first instance of terrorism being prosecuted in the District of Columbia as it related to our friends at the Family Research Council, because the SPLC, according to the perpetrator, had given him the information that prompted him to want to go in and murder as many people, including people like Tony Perkins and our friend Jerry Boykin and so many others, innocent people, simply because the Southern Poverty Law Center had said that they were being beastly to homosexuals. Not true. It doesn't matter whether it was true. It was going to have the effect of silencing them. And as I say, it's had a material impact on fundraising and other things that do affect their livelihood, just as it did with this, triple amputee veteran, for heaven's sakes. But, Kevin, what I'm saying is these guys are playing with people who are interested in not just denying us freedom of speech, they're interested in silencing us the old-fashioned way,
permanently,
murderously.
So what's the solution? What should we be doing as a government to address this red-green axis and to address the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, we'd need about 4 shows to go through this in detail, but let me just say, I think the first order of business is to recognize what we've got going on here, and that is we do have an internal security threat. It's made vastly worse because these Muslim Brotherhood and other Sharia supremacists are being aided and abetted and enabled and legitimized and protected by the left. Crazy as that sounds, because they share at least an intermediate objective, which is destroying America. That has to be understood, and once you understand it, there are lots of things that you can do to resist it. You can root out, whether it's in the deep state, or whether it's in mosques, or whether it's in the various front groups that George Soros is financing, the people who are effectively waging war against our country. And by that I mean revolutionary activity that is ultimately becoming more and more violent, as I suspect you've noticed, and I'm sure your audience has as well. But it starts with awareness of the problem,
like
a
James
recognition
O'Keefe
that
has
it's true.
brought out a lot of the
Absolutely.
deep state hatred of America.
Trevor Loudon has been documenting the people in Congress who are tied in with the communists, with the social democrats, with the Muslim Brotherhood, in some cases more than one of those entities, and who are nonetheless, unbelievably, getting access to the most sensitive secrets in the land because they happen to serve on the House Intelligence Committee, as Andre Carson does, or the House Armed Services Committee, or the House Homeland Security Committee, or the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Or take the example, this was one of those things that we've talked about before, we've had Pakistani Sharia supremacists actually running the IT services for some of these guys, which means that whatever secrets they had access to, in all likelihood, could well have been compromised too by Pakistani intelligence. Which means that there's an external component to this internal threat as well. And if I could just sum it up, I'm so excited about this program because I think it is an opportunity for us to do what I am convinced we must for the American people, and that is to reawaken in them a sense of national security mindedness in the economic space and hopefully in as many others as possible, because it's as fundamental as our survival instincts. And if we don't actually exhibit this, our freedom of speech is just one of our constitutional liberties that's going to be gone, and we will be at the mercy of people who will deny us our national and physical and economic security in due course, inevitably.
So, as individuals, what can one person do? What would you suggest?
Look, one person can do a lot. It may not feel that way, but they can. Let me just give you an example. As we're speaking, there's an election underway. There's an opportunity to be in the face of people who are seeking your vote.
Candidates always listen when they're running
When
for
they're
office.
up for election,
Yeah.
this is the window of opportunity. But after the election, there are other opportunities as well. Get on talk radio. Call the person who's hosting and give them a piece of your mind. Talk to your elected representatives. Talk to your editorial board of your local paper. Talk to your city council.
To
talk
do
to
that,
your
you have to be
sheriffs.
educated, though.
You absolutely have to be
because
educated.
you'll get chewed up and spit out if you're
Absolutely.
not.
It's really important, because one of the other things about the Muslim Brotherhood, I mentioned that they're clean cut. Many times they're very polite. In fact, our mutual friend John Guandolo, former counterterrorism officer in the FBI, says they're always the nicest guy in the room.
Yeah.
But what they also are is prepared. So you do need to do your homework. This is a great resource, the Economic War Room. I would commend again our platform, securefreedom.org. Once you've got the brief, we need you to get involved in what's going on in your schools, what's going on in your city council, what's going on in the local mosques. These are all places where the red-green axis is at work, and even one person can help make a difference in countering it.
Well, you know, and when you post on Facebook, what you look at, what you share, that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Your money, your livelihood, your way of life is at risk. And the Muslim Brotherhood, the Red-Green Axis, there is a deep state, and they seem to be coordinated working against you for their political purposes. And so it's absolutely essential that you get educated. We'll do our best to continue to bring guests like Frank Gaffney here to educate you as to the risk that you're facing, how it's going to impact your finances, and what you can do about it. So Frank, thank you so much for joining us today in the
Pleasure as
Economic War
always.
Room.
Thank you, Kevin.